Welcome to Scary Stories and Happy Halloween. Even if you're watching this in November or later, Happy Halloween anyway. It's sort of always Halloween around here. This time we've got over 90 minutes of scary Dogman and Werewolf animated episodes for you, collected for Halloween. Some of these are more like animated films, some are more like scary stories with stuff moving around on screen, and some of them are hybrids. Let's start with this early experiment of mine that uses animation to tell the story. Like some of the others, it has its own unique, weird AI animated opening, so I'll leave those intact when they come up. Hope you're buckled in, because we're about to get underway. Who is afraid of the big bad wolf? An animated Dogman story. Dear Scary Stories, I am a 25-year-old female, and I have a Dogman story I would like for you to read. It's a true story, but it started with this recurring dream I kept having. I was alone in the forest, and although I knew exactly what place I was in, it looked strange, and nothing seemed as though it were normal. I also felt kind of like someone was there, although I didn't notice anyone else. When I turned to my left, though, there was a huge wolf standing there, and yet he wasn't a wolf at all, but some kind of a man. He just stood there, staring at me, which I found terrifying. Yet he didn't attack me. He seemed to be trying to tell me something. That's the part where I would become too uncomfortable to remain in the dream anymore. I'd wake up each time feeling like a small child, tiny, alone, and defenseless, in a giant, feral, and unfriendly world. When I wake up from a nightmare, I always comb my hair, then put it up in a bun, the way a lady is supposed to, or an adult at least. I figure if I look like a grown-up, then my childish nightmares will fade. The daylight has come. No more time for fantasies of impossible creatures like werewolves. I had far more realistic monsters in my life. At the age of 25, I had already failed as an adult and was currently listing my employment as has-been. Nobody feels sorry for me, as I had married rich, and they still hate me for it. The fact that I failed as the far younger trophy wife of a wealthy man got me no sympathy, just contempt for having blown my chance. Look at me in this portrait that my husband, my ex-husband, had painted of me. I look confused in those clothes and in that lifestyle. Look at the ridiculously ornate frame he put it in. Now that painting, this rundown cabin, and a few broken kitsch items on the fireplace mantel are all that's left from me from that marriage. Somehow, even though we had lived as a married couple for over 5 months, his mother managed to get it annulled. And that's a good word for me. Annulled. Even when I was with him, I never really was. He'd bring me to parties and leave me there. I don't know where he went then, just as I don't know where he's gone now. When I think back on it, I was just as alone back then as I am now. But on the outside, I seemed successful and happy to others. Now everyone can see that I've crashed and burned. When I'm stressed and confused, I take a shower. Today, I'm taking a very long shower. There's that sound again. Okay, am I hearing it? Or am I imagining it? I better go out and look. Why, there's a dog out there. It's a dog outside the glass doors. Or is that a coyote? Or a wolf? Why is it staring at me like that? Does it want to kill and eat me? I hope it can't break in. I don't know how I could even begin to defend myself against an animal as big as that one. And what if it has rabies or something? Maybe that dog I saw before was just hungry. Maybe it was just looking to come in from the rain. Maybe its normal shelter got flooded. It has been pouring outside for days on end. I should probably listen to the weather report, but whatever. I'm not sure why I got so frightened of that dog. Maybe I should have let it in. I mean, what if it drowns now because of me? That would suck, wouldn't it? Still, I don't understand why I have such a strong feeling that I'm being watched. I used to live life, but now I sit and read books about other people's lives instead. Romance novels mostly. Sometimes self-help books. But when they start to tell me to stop feeling sorry for myself and get off my butt, then I go back to romance. Did you hear that? I've been hearing that sound off and on for almost 20 minutes now. I could swear there's someone out there, messing around, or spying on me. Maybe it's that dog come back, looking for food. If I had anyone else here with me, I'd probably just ignore it. But something about being alone in the cabin here in the woods makes me feel paranoid on dark, rainy nights. Better to go have a look than to sit and worry about it. I really can't tell if I'm seeing something out there or not. I'm gonna go put on my riding hood and go look out there. It's weird how it feels so much like my dream. I feel like if I go out there, something is gonna happen to me. Wow, it's kind of a spooky rainy night. I don't see anyone out there, but that doesn't mean that nobody's there. I feel almost like one of those people who say that Bigfoot stares at their cabin while hiding behind trees. It genuinely feels like I have multiple sets of eyes on me right now. I could swear that I saw something go into that old stable that I've never used. I thought I saw a shadow of something as big as a horse. But there hasn't been a horse in that stable for at least 5 years. Before my husband bought the place from me. No, I don't see anyone or anything inside. I guess I might have imagined it. I sort of wish I had another person out here with me, so I could tell how much of what I'm seeing is really there. Is any of this my imagination creating scenarios because I've been alone for too long? I started back toward the cabin, but some river or something must have breached its banks because that place was now flooded. I should say it was flooding, as the water was still pouring in and getting higher as I looked through the window. Now I had nothing at all left in this world, not even a place to feel sorry for myself. I would have slumped to the ground and wept, but the water level was rising, and the cold flow around my legs was chilling me to the bone. I was never more afraid than in that moment. But when I turned, I saw a creature not too different from the one in my recurring dream. It was a dog, but it was a man too, and it was standing and waiting for me on a little rock, barely still sticking above the waterline. For some reason, I wasn't scared. Instead, I felt a sense of relief. This was the only familiar-looking thing in my life. This dog-headed man was the man of my dreams in a literal sense. This meant to me that those dreams had meaning. And if my dreams had meaning, then my life must have meaning too. I took the craziest leap of faith in my life, and I traveled with that big dog man through the flooded woods, heading further and further away from the direction I knew civilization was in. I was following a strange wild animal deeper into the woods during a natural disaster, which was the least logical thing that I could be doing. But when we arrived at a little home in the woods, high and dry on a little hill of its own, I was relieved to read the sign out front informing me that this was in fact a ranger station for a park ranger. I was saved. I turned to thank the dogman, but he was already loping away on all fours. Apparently he had other people to save. But I soon learned that the dogman had left me in good hands. The ranger in that station is a handsome fellow that you can call Ranger Manley. Lord knows I do. It turns out he didn't doubt me for 1 minute when I told him about the big gray dogman leading me to his home. In fact, he told me a lot of stories about those creatures. He has a great deal of respect for them. Our brave Ranger Manley calls them people, not animals. We both took it as a sign that the Dogman decided we should be together. And I feel like the luckiest person in the entire world. I would never have been this happy if I hadn't lost everything first. I could never have appreciated my ranger friend if I hadn't had such an unhappy time before meeting him. But most of all, the two of us wouldn't have been able to be so happy together if it were not for the North American upright walking canid, aka the Dogman. Cooler than a drink of sarsaparilla. He's the Tim named after Godzilla. We wouldn't be able to present new episodes to you right now if it were not for the man so big on the inside that they nicknamed him after a giant on the outside. I'm talking of course about the magnificent Godzilla Tim Walker in Ireland. Godzilla Tim funded the animation you just watched and kept me eating bananas and blueberries the entire time. Everyone knows that Bigfoot loved blueberries, but since bananas don't grow wild up in North America, very few people know that we love them too. Godzilla Tim knows though, and so he financed my banana feast in order to bring you the show that you just watched today. Please thank this giant of a man, because without him, there would have been no new story this day. Next up, we've got a story of two runaways who encounter a werewolf-type entity. But does it mean them good or ill? The Runaways and the Dogman. This animated film depicts events which took place many years ago, in a time before teenage girls knew what a smartphone was. I know many of you will find that part harder to believe than the fact that these two girls encountered some kind of upright walking canine man in the woods on the scariest night of their lives. Meet Mia and Leah. Not their real names. These two girls are fraternal twins, meaning they were born the same night, but they do not look identical. They were unfortunately born to poor parents in the rich parent world of the 1980s, ashamed of their upbringing and receiving harsh hazing from their richer schoolmates. The duo has decided to run away from home to the wooded hills of Pennsylvania. Neither girl thought to bring a compass with them, or a map. There was no such thing as GPS either. They were lost long before they realized they were, and the woods of Pennsylvania are about the spookiest place that you can get lost in all the world. There were little creatures observing them ever since they entered the forest, but neither Leah nor Mia sensed one single one of them. Those woods are enchanted, I assure you, so I urge you to be cautious when traveling there. There are predators in Pennsylvania too, and I'm not just referring to some of the politicians either. I know from personal experience that there are things in those woods that can eat you alive, and that's no exaggeration. And when the girls started to hear that wolf-like howling, then they began to realize that too. Feeling too frightened to stay where they were, the girls made a big mistake by leaving their campsite at night. They really should have waited for the sun to come up before moving and hunkered down for the night. But instead they wandered right into the darkness that those terrifying howls were emerging from. It was a mistake to be certain, and there was someone, or something, waiting for them in those woods, waiting for them to make that very error. The howls stopped, and the girls hoped they were finally free of whatever creature had been making them. They wandered down a path in the woods into a clearing, and there, in that clearing, stood a massive man-thing, a dog-headed monster that stood like a man. Its muscles were so massive that he seemed to be twice as wide as a very tall and well-built man. yet he was covered entirely in fur, and his pointed ears up on top of his head betrayed that he could not in fact be human. The girls stood frozen, unsure what to do. They were already tired from the chase, and this beast man was obviously a greater athlete than either of them. If they ran from it, they wouldn't get far. Even if they ran in different directions, he'd be certain to get at least one of them. It seemed as though they would be victims of this great beast on that night. But instead of advancing upon them, instead of pouncing on the girls and tearing them limb from limb to devour as his dinner, the beast stood still and stared, observing the two lost teens, as if searching for something in their eyes. Finally, he lifted one arm and pointed away into the woods. Confused, the girls at first just stared. Then it dawned on them. That creature was pointing their way out of the woods. It wasn't there to catch them. It was there to get them back to civilization. Walking in the direction they were instructed, the girls soon found themselves walking up to the woods that they recognized behind their parents' house. Mia and Leah were not punished that night. Instead, they were greeted with news that their father had gotten a new job at better pay, and that would mean the family would be moving away from the bullies and troubles that the girls had been trying to run away from. This would be the beginning of a good period for all of them. How do I know so much about this family and the events of that night? Because I am the father of those girls, who are now adults with families of their own. And although they still do not know this to this day, I was also the werewolf that guided them home. The end. Hey, I don't want to sound like some kind of braggart, but we just got rejoined by Patricia Tager. That's right, Patricia Tager has just rejoined our channel members, and so can you. In this next one, followed by a Dogman, I had to see if I could make a cartoon that was a short film from start to finish. It has narration in the beginning and end, but it's mostly told through action and dialogue. I like to do more along these lines, but maybe I can base them on real cases or make them scarier, we'll see. For now, here's another experimental Dogman animation, and I hope you enjoy it.
I like Dogman stories. You know what I don't like? I don't like people who ask, hey, but Dogman is real, but why are all the settings of it so recent? Well, I've got a story that goes all the way back to 1962, and it's about a real-life werewolf that was seen in the woods outside of a certain Midwestern town. So journey with me back to the pre-psychedelic 60s, a time when, to be honest, many still thought it was the 50s. I still hadn't seen any hippies by that point. But I knew of a certain popular beatnik hangout on the poor side of town. All the cool cats would go there to purr their rhymes to the pretty girls. Some came to listen and dig.
Hey there, doll in the gray flannel suit. Your typewriter goes clickety-clack, ain't that a hoot? Your steno pad, carbon paper, both those so neat. Your IBM Selectric, it taps out the beat.
Oh, I do love my new Selectric.
In your world of ledgers and balance sheets, I'm just a cat who digs all the beats. I'm hip to the jive, I'm cool, I'm slick. But your world of numbers, girl, that makes me sick.
Makes you... wait, what?
Your pencil skirt, your white blouse so crisp. Your horn-rimmed glasses, they make me lisp.
I don't wear glasses.
Your hair in a bun, your sensible shoes, oh baby, you give me the office blues.
And these shoes are not sensible.
I wanna take you to a smoky joint where the bongos play and the points don't point. Where the coffee's black and the poetry's free. And all the cats talk about philosophy.
When does the philosophy start?
I'll read you Kerouac and Ginsberg too. I'll show you a world that is fresh and new. I'll woo you with words. I'll woo you with rhyme. I'll woo you until it's my quitting time.
Steven, you'd need a job before you could have a quitting time.
But you just giggle and you just laugh. You think my world is no wheat and all chaff. You're straight, you're square, you're oh so prim. And I'm just a beatnik who's here on your whim.
I'm here on your whim. You invited me.
So here's to Imogen, the great office queen, and her button-down world of pressed gray and long green. I'll keep my bongos, she'll keep her files, and we'll both keep walking our separate miles.
And want me to leave?
Huh? No, doll, I don't want you to leave.
You just said we should walk our separate miles. Listen to me, mister. You can't break up with me. We've never even had a single date.
Well, what if I walk you home? Then could I break up with you?
Steven, I guarantee that if you walk me home, I'll break up with you.
It's a deal. I'll get your coat.
I didn't wear a coat. It's summer.
Oh, good. Then I don't have to tip the chick in the coat room. Let's split.
So I can tell that's not your first poem, huh?
Nah. I write poems all the time. I'm a genius at it, honestly.
Oh, I admire an honest man.
Me too. I don't want to brag, but even my name means poetry. Or speech, at least. What's your name mean, Imogen?
My name just means me.
Don't be obtuse, my muse. Every name has a meaning, so what's yours?
Imogen just means a young woman. That's me.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying there. Wow, the road to your place is sort of dark and creepy. You aren't Dracula's daughter or something, are you?
I don't know why you put me down all the time. The only reason I agreed to meet you at the club was because you reminded me of Riff from West Side Story.
Riff? Is that Russ Tamblyn or the other guy?
Russ Tamblyn.
Oh, right, okay, I can see that. I don't mind that.
So who do I remind you of?
You? I don't know, let's see. Maybe like a school teacher?
Steven, why do you have to be such a Maynard G. Krabs? How are you making your footsteps so loud?
I don't know, that's a good question, doll. Wait, I'm gonna try an experiment. That's a monster.
That's a wolf man.
Werewolf, wolfman.
That's a monster.
Don't panic, doll. That's just what it wants us to do. Let's just resume walking and act like everything's Jake.
Yep, Jake.
J-K-L-M-N-O-P.
We're as cool as cucumbers.
Frozen pickles, the kind that tickles.
He's still following us, isn't he?
Hang on, let's check. Yeah, he's still right behind us.
Well, aren't you gonna do something?
Me? Why don't you do something?
I don't know, maybe it's because I am not the man?
Alright, that's a good point.
So what are you gonna do?
Let's see. What would Kerouac do?
You'd probably recite poetry at the monster. Oh, Steven, don't do what Kerouac would do. Do something to save us.
Well, gee, doll, alright. I'm trying to think of what I can remember about werewolves, you know?
They eat people. That's the only important part.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, let me think a second. Oh, okay, I got it. Hang on. I extol thee, foul demon. In the name of the great God Almighty, I beseech you, and ramificate you. Go back to whence you came from, unholy sepulcher.
I don't think you used that word correctly.
Which word?
I'm not even sure where to begin.
Look, he's leaving. It worked.
Wow, Steven, you're amazing. I didn't even know you carried a cross with you.
Well, it's for good luck. My grandma gave it to me.
Oh, that's so sweet, your grandma.
Yeah, well, I didn't know you'd think it was such a big deal.
A nice eval, folks.
Yes, officer, same to you.
Oh yeah, same to you, Fuzz. So what was I saying, doll?
How much you love your grandma and how you want to get married and settle down as soon as you've gotten a good job.
I was saying that.
And so I let them go back to thinking that Beatnik had rescued the girl. In truth, that werewolf fled because he saw me coming. And he knew I was the first and then only werewolf hunter on the police force anywhere in the Midwest. And about that would be getting into other stories. And this video is about the girl and the Beatnik. If you want to hear more stories, I can be bribed into talking, you know. Until then, everything I know is locked up inside this 88-year-old brain. And the only other one that knows the truth about the Midwestern Dogman is the Midwestern Dogman himself.
Watch out for the Wolfman child. He is evil, he is wild.
Oh, sing me a song of Godzilla Tim, for I can ne'er hear too much of him. He's as kind a gentleman as there can be, and a big grateful thank you goes from me to him. Thank you, Godzilla Tim!
The next one is The Dogman Took My Life. I think it's fairly nice looking, but it's something I was able to create in a day or two. The animation is walking or talking because there wasn't much time for anything else. I think it came out pretty creepy though, and I hope you agree. The Bloody Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I just got permission from my girlfriend to send you this crazy story that her late father George transcribed back a long time ago. We were at her mother's house looking at some of her dad's old things that were gonna get donated or trashed if nobody wanted them. In among the stuff were folders of his old writings, which were typed out by an old-school typewriter onto paper, not onto discs or anything like that. One of the things he had written down was labeled a transcription from a handwritten note left behind by his uncle who had died. We asked my girlfriend's mom, and she had no memory of this writing, or of the relative that the writing referred to. It dated back to a time before their marriage, and must have been typed out when George was in his early 20s. What makes it interesting to me is that George's widow said that he spent his early 20s researching his own family history and writing fiction loosely based on his family's real-life stories. But since the typed-out pages are not labeled as fiction but instead as fact, it's hard to gauge what this is that we're reading. It seems to be his Uncle Jed writing about how he got trapped in a shack in the woods by a dogman or a werewolf. Now, did this really happen? Or was this an early form of creepypasta that just happened to feature a certain Midwestern cryptid that so many others have claimed to have seen in real life since this was written? At any rate, with permission from my girlfriend's family, I present to you the typewritten pages exactly as originally written. Uncle Jed's final note, found handwritten in an abandoned shack in the Headmark Pines State Natural Area last year, and returned to my family at the address that Uncle Jed wrote on the top of the several-page-long farewell letter. Here's what he wrote. October 4th, 1977. Lost somewhere in the northern Wisconsin woods. To whomever finds this note, if you are reading this, I am likely dead already. Please forward this to my family, whose address I have written at the top of this page. I will attempt to explain what to them would likely appear to be me vanishing off the face of the earth. Dear family, you must have so many questions, and I wish my answers were happier ones. I know you all thought I was going to be driving south when I last left you, but I was in too dark a mood over the divorce, and the feeling that I would have to start my life from scratch in my later 30s. I was driving on a country road when a great beast walked out in front of my car, almost causing me to drive off the road and crash. When I saw this creature, I thought I had journeyed back through time to before civilization existed. What I saw before me was something primitive and monstrous, like you might expect in caveman times. It wasn't a dinosaur, though. It was some kind of a hairy thing. You should have seen the size of this beast. As tall as a horse, but walking on two legs like a man. Its head is like a wolf, I guess you might say. At least that's the closest I can get to describing that monster head. It's got a long dog face, but the teeth are more like what you'd expect from a saber-toothed tiger in an archaeology textbook. The thing walked out on that road as though he owned it, and as I swerved around him and hit the brakes as hard as I could, the creature never even reacted to me. I spun out, and it was only luck and the friction of us sliding sideways on the tall grass and weeds that stopped me from rolling down the steep hill and ending my story right then and there. When the skidding vehicle and I finally stopped, curiosity overwhelmed me, and I found myself following the big dog-like man thing into those woods. Why I did this, I don't know, but the decision seems to have led to my personal doom. One bad decision ends an entire life. I don't understand what came over me. I must have been momentarily enchanted or something. Honestly, I don't know what I was thinking when I walked in here. I am far from being a woodsman. Why I thought I could wander off trail into virgin woodland and find my way back to my car, I don't know. I brought no weapons with me should the big animal turn to attack. So what exactly was I thinking when I left my vehicle and entered into these dark woods? I lost the creature almost immediately, and I got myself lost almost as quickly. The wildness of nature is just like the rest of my life, beautiful, but frighteningly out of my control. I meant well in my marriage. I meant well with my kids. It didn't matter according to the judge. The idea of losing my entire family in one day felt like the end of everything for me. But now, sitting here in the dark, I just want to survive and get out of these woods somehow. I don't want people to think that I ended my own story out of grief or self-pity. If I can't be a father to my children anymore, at least I can be an example by persevering through this time. I would never take my own life, and I don't want my kids to think that I did. Depression is a bad thing, but realizing you are lost in the woods is much worse. Before, I was down in the dumps about losing my family, but now, I am in fear of losing my life, and I can suddenly see the difference. But you know, life had one more lesson to teach me today on top of all that. As I tried to keep everything under control and work my way out of the woods, instead I found myself face to face with the big dog man who had caused me to be in these woods in the first place. And as disinterested as he was when I was nearly driving into him in the car, that's just how interested and unhappy he suddenly was with me. He is so large, and I was standing so close. My knees wobbled beneath me. I wanted to faint, and I wanted to run away, but I did neither. Instead, I turned and walked away, as casually as I could manage under the circumstances. I also felt like I was gonna pee down my leg and throw up my lunch, but I managed to just keep walking, just keep moving slowly and casually forward. Why had I chosen this direction to walk in? Because it put the big werewolf man behind me, that's why. But he didn't just stand there and watch me leave. No, the big dog-headed wolfman started walking after me. I would occasionally pause and lean against a tree from time to time. It gave me a chance to catch my breath, get my bearings, and also try to catch a glimpse or two at that wolfman creature. Now, I don't think it's a werewolf, in that I don't think it changes back to a man when the sun comes up. I think this is a natural wolfman, like some kind of wolf that evolved to walk upright. Or maybe a kind of bear that evolved to have longer legs and taller ears, I don't know. I think it's a real animal though. I don't think I'm imagining it. And I don't think it's a supernatural being like a ghost. It doesn't seem intelligent like a man, but I assume it possesses great animal cunning. This has to be a meat-eating beast, judging by its teeth and claws. And I do have to assume that this explains its interest in me. It might not have been interested in my car because cars are not edible. Maybe once I was out in the forest, getting nervous and sweaty, I drew the creature to me with my aroma. It could probably smell my fear. And when I was walking away from that thing, it probably smelled how edible I am. At least so far. When I saw this dilapidated old structure in the woods, I hoped that I was rescued. I was praying that someone would be inside here, but the place seems to be abandoned. There's no electricity and it's dark, but I'm hiding out in here, writing this note on paper I found here. There doesn't seem to be any food or water here at all, and I suspect the monster may have located me since I think I hear him walking around outside. It might also be a large man, I guess, but I'm too frightened that it might not be to risk calling out to whoever or whatever that is. He's found me here. The creature looked into this shack, and I think we both saw each other. I'm not sure why he hasn't come in to snatch me up and finish me off. It seems he would rather I walked out there and served myself up to him on a platter. That is something I'd rather not do. Still, when I get hungry enough or thirsty enough, can I say that I wouldn't risk running out there? I have no desire to leave here yet, but this old abandoned structure seems pretty ramshackle. I bet that wolf could blow it down if he huffed and he puffed enough. I'm listening to that terrible thing screaming at me from outside. It sounds almost half-human somehow, but it sounds nothing at all like a man. A brainless, hungry beast who walks upright like a man. That is what I'm going to be done in by. And speaking of hunger, I've searched every inch of this place to see if there might be a stray yodel or ring-ding. I'm not sure why, but that's what I most wish I could taste again before I get torn apart by that unthinking beast out there. Actually, I wish I could eat almost anything. Just one final meal to quiet my belly before the inevitable. I should be writing some profound final words in case this gets back to my children, but instead all I can think of is my stomach. Their mother would say that's typical of me, and maybe she's right in this one case. What truly makes me different from that animal monster outside? Besides the fact that he's the winner and I'm the loser. If I had him trapped, he might not be writing a letter to his loved ones, but he might be thinking of them, and possibly experiencing many of the same emotions that I'm feeling. Then again, maybe not. Well, I got impatient and I decided to make a run for it. I hadn't seen or heard the beast for some time, so I snuck out of this shack and I made a beeline for the woods. Well, the beast was there waiting for me, and I swear, he seemed to have almost a grin on his face. When he shouted something at me, my legs turned to jelly, and I felt myself fainting. The weird thing is I could also feel myself turning around and going back to the shack. It was almost like watching a puppet show of myself. I didn't feel like I was in the driver's seat or behind the steering wheel. I just sort of looked down at myself walking and staggering back toward the shack interior, and the big dog-headed man seemed to be having an absolute ball with all of this. He had an evil sort of smile on his monster face, and it looked to me like he planned on dragging this out all night, and maybe into the next day. Well, the wolfman made lunges for my puppet body, and I surprised myself over and over with how the puppet was able to leap away at the last second each time. It looked like Geppetto the skilled puppeteer must have been operating me, and it made me feel like maybe I will be able to survive this horrible day. But here I am, back inside the shack, and back inside myself, and the dog-headed man seems happier than ever. All I did was waste my energy, which I need to conserve. All I did was give that monster a reason to celebrate and feel more confident than before. I had a lumberjack uncle who told me stories about monsters like the hodag, and like this wolfman that was outside grinning at me. I used to laugh at all the stories. I mean to say, I was meant to. They were funny stories as well as scary. Most of the creatures were impossible, and so I had assumed that this Wisconsin werewolf character was a legend as well. I had laughed at the stories, but I am now becoming the butt of the joke. It seems I fell asleep, and the monster did not come in and take me while I was unconscious. The sun is beginning to come up, so I am hoping the Wolfman will leave, or perhaps he has already left. I feel insane this morning. I wonder if what I was tormented by last night could actually be a werewolf. Could he have returned home to his human life by now? Could he be back to being the father of children, the husband of a woman? Could he have what I've lost? Or was he truly just the beast that he seemed to me to be? As I sit here quietly listening, wondering if he is still nearby, I am also wondering if I am cracking up. What if the stress of losing my family is what caused me to chase that strange animal into the woods? Or what if the stress of losing everyone I loved all at once caused me to see the strange animal that crossed the road? What if it were never there at all, except in my mind? As I hear a morning bird, and I see the first rays of sun lighting things up outside, I have to say that I am hoping it was all some sort of nightmare. I have never been called crazy, so maybe this is what insanity is like. All I know about crazy people is from watching Hitchcock movies, and I don't know how close he gets to reality. Maybe I've lost my mind and none of this even happened. I mean, how would I prove it? One way or the other. I've been to the window and I looked out without noticing the creature anyplace. Of course, it might be sleeping lightly in the woods just outside. It might be waiting to ambush me in the morning sunlight. I would have no way of knowing without going out there and making a run for it. And even if the Wisconsin werewolf doesn't get me, that's no guarantee that I'll get out of these woods alive. I don't even know which direction my car is in, so I'm gonna have to get lucky to survive this, even if the Wolfman has gotten bored and moved on already. It's weird, but I've always felt safe in the morning, as opposed to the dark night. I suppose that's true of most people. But I don't feel safe this morning, though. I can imagine that creature being almost anywhere, waiting for me to step just a little bit too close. I am so high-strung over him that I'm likely to have an attack and seize up if a frog croaks at me too loud. I might scare myself to death and save that monster the trouble. Well, I can't stall any longer. I've got to make a break for it this morning to have the best chance of finding my way back to civilization before it gets dark again tonight. If this letter gets to my family, and he lists the names there, please tell them that I love them with all my heart, and I will miss them forever. And that's where the typing ends. We still don't know if this is what it claims to be, or if it's an early work of fiction by my girlfriend's dad. But it's a story that I find haunting in either case. I hope you found it interesting, and if I learn any more about this incident or that relative, I'll get back to you with the additional information. Hey everybody, I'm going to sing a song for today's executive producer, Angie K. Me.
Today we say thanks to dear Angie K. She donated using the super thanks way, and she believes in the US of A. And so we say thank you to dear Angie K.
Here's I Decided to Follow a Dogman, another one narrated by an on-screen character. Enjoy. I decided to follow a dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. Hey, I'm Daniel and I've had a Michigan Dogman experience that I want to tell you about. Make yourself comfortable. This here is the window I first saw the creature from. It's a pretty wild view, huh? Especially at night. I'm not originally from this part of the country, but I moved here after my divorce. My wife got the house and all my friends, but left me enough money that I moved to an entirely different state to start over. And I do plan on starting over again at some point. Right now, I mainly need to get the voices of everyone I ever knew out of my head, so I can remember which voice is mine. When I first got here, I would sit here by the window and I would read. At first I never looked out at all. If there were neighbors, I didn't want to meet them. If there were animals, I didn't think they were cute. I wanted to get lost in escapist literature and sometimes old fantasy movies from previous generations. I had moved to these woods to take a break from reality for a little while, so it took me some time to notice that reality hadn't taken a break from me. After getting satiated with fiction after a couple or 3 weeks, I finally took a look outside my window one evening, and what I saw is basically the reason I've even got anything at all to say to you fine people. And that's because what I saw was the Michigan Dogman, right outside my own window. Not being from around here, I had to look this creature up online, and I was somewhat surprised to find out that it isn't even supposed to officially exist. I mean, I saw it before I learned the name of it, so it's not like my imagination was inspired by the local legends. I heard the stories after seeing the thing. I admit I don't really know what the creature is, but I saw it walking past my house, so I know it exists. I wondered if I might be in danger living in this place, which motivated my looking up the Dogman online. Each article I read got me more frightened than the one before it. At some point I stopped worrying if I was in danger, and started wondering just how much danger I was in. At this point it got hard for me to sleep. I just stared out the window all the time, like that was gonna solve something. When I would see the beast, it was running swiftly, so fast that no man could hope to keep up. But then one day, I saw it walking in a slow and casual manner through the brush. On a whim, I decided to follow the creature into the forest. I kept back a ways with the wind in my face, and I walked as quietly as I could so that the Dogman didn't realize I was following him. This was the scariest moment of my life, and it was also the stupidest thing I've ever done. Please don't try this at home, if you know what I mean. So at some point, the Dogman stops walking when he comes to this cluster of trees and branches that seem to be arranged into almost what I might call a nest of sorts. And in that nest were a bunch of little puppies. The Dogman kneeled down and started feeding the pups, but it wasn't meat he was giving them. It was some kind of fruit that he carried in his hands. I think it was blueberries, but it might have been blackberries or some other kind of fruit that I don't know the name of. The creature appeared to be male, yet he was exhibiting nurturing behavior toward what I have to presume were its own youth. I did not see any other adult dog men or women there, but possibly the mother was off gathering food and would return shortly. If so, that meant one more reason for me to get out of there. I left my home to follow a scary and dangerous monster, but I found myself spying on a parent and his kids. I was becoming the monster, so I retreated. Since then, I have noticed the Dogman walking by a few more times. I avert my eyes when I do. I don't want to become known as the kind of guy who spies on his neighbors. Why did the Dogman chase me? Dear Scary Stories NYC, If you decide to do my story, please start out with an image of me running, okay? I don't want to be like one of those people who spends 10 minutes talking about how his girlfriend left him. I want to jump directly into when things got crazy. I mean, it is true, my girlfriend did dump me, so I was camping by myself in northern Michigan, not far from where I lived at the time. And then, out of the blue, in the middle of the night, with no warning whatsoever, this huge dogman ripped my tent out of the ground and shook me out of it like I was the prize in a box of Cracker Jacks. That's how I came to be running as fast as I could through the middle of the woods in the night in northern Michigan. The big guy behind me, that's a dogman. At least I think it is. It might be a werewolf or something else. It behaves like an insane person. That's why I don't know if it's a dogman. Why would a dogman have shaken me out of my tent? There are easier to catch prey in the woods than a grown man in a tent. In fact, we ran past some deer a ways back and scared them off. Those would be better eating than me. We also caused an owl to fly off. You can't tell me that I'm the best available food for this beast running after me. I kinda think this is all happening because of someone with a grudge against me. But how could a person with a grudge against you turn into a big furry monster, you ask me? I don't know. I only know that I'm being chased, and I'm guessing as to the possible reasons why. An animal is only gonna chase you for a reason, and usually it's the same with humans. But let's face it, we've all met people who just made no sense, right? Still, this is a story that really happened to me, back when I first got dumped by my girlfriend. And at that point there were a few people who were very angry with me. Human people, I mean. I never thought the Dogman was real, but clearly it or something like it is legit. So for me in that moment, it wasn't that much further a leap of logic to go from thinking Dogman to thinking werewolf. What if this was one of my enemies turned into a werewolf and looking to take revenge? Now, when I say werewolf in this context, I guess I might be saying that it just had human intelligence. I mean, maybe it was a shapeshifter, but maybe it was an intelligent werewolf. My gut kinda tells me that it must have had some connection to human civilization. I just feel as if it were angry at me because of something I did. Another possibility that a friend of mine suggested to me afterward was that this could have been a curse put upon me, that sort of thing. Like someone cast a spell to have a monster pursue me and do me in. In that case, it wasn't the monster itself that had the grudge on me. Maybe it was my ex-girlfriend flying into a rage and using the witchcraft powers that I think most women are innately born with. So I started to get tired and I couldn't run as fast. The dogman or werewolf or whatever he was, he didn't try to catch up to me though. He just kept around the same distance between us. I don't think he was getting tired. I think he was trying to wear me out. He wasn't going to make his move on me until he had me good and exhausted. I aim to make that happen a long time into the future. Now in my mind I was panicking, so I couldn't remember what direction I had taken off running in. I also couldn't remember at first which direction I should be heading in to get back to where some other people would be. Safety in numbers and all that. Plus, I don't think this beast was after anyone else but me. I should only be in danger as long as I was alone. So I needed to get where other people were. I remember looking around for the moon or stars to try to get my bearings. But the trees seemed to reach right up into the sky, and all I could see was them, with the sky barely peeking through between the leaves. I remembered that moss only grows on one side of trees. Then I forgot which side that was, so the information was useless. I started to seriously run out of gas, and I still had no idea where I was. I wished I could at least know what direction to run in, but I was losing hope as fast as I was losing my energy. I was basically walking at this point, but the dogman just walked along behind me, keeping pace, keeping the same distance. I had no choice but to keep going, but it had become an extremely low-speed chase. I started to see things that happened to me in my past appearing before my eyes, and I knew that my body was getting ready to shut down. I felt like everything inside of me was ready to go to sleep, and it was all about to end. I heard a sound that I will forever associate with the joyous feeling of my life being saved. I forced myself to climb a small hill through some bushes, and there I discovered 3 rotund fellows sitting at a folding table outside their trailer, drinking carbonated beverages and passing gas. They greeted me in a friendly manner and offered me a beer. I reached out to accept it, and I don't remember what happened next. Apparently, I fainted dead away. The guys took care of me that night, and in the morning, I told them the story of that insane dogman that chased me to their trailer. They looked at each other and made comments about how it sounded more like I had met up with some magic mushrooms than a big old dogman. They were Michigan natives, but they thought I was bonkers for saying I'd seen the Michigan Dogman. Explain that to me if you can. See, I was able to tell you a story about my Dogman experience without going into any details at all about my girlfriend dumping me. Or hardly any details. So this just goes to show that it can be done. Thank you in advance if you use this story. And please be careful when camping in the Midwest. You never know who's gonna provide you with your wake-up call. You can still tune in and see my face thanks to our executive producer, Ace. Please join me in thanking today's executive producer, Ace Williams, for making this episode possible. Ace is a member of our PayPal Subscribers Club, a top-tier member in fact, which allows him to see our weekly, secret, uncensored episodes, as well as our over 25 hours of archived secret episodes as well. This next episode, The Green-Haired Dog Lady of the Woods, is not really an animated episode, but it is about showing you the stages of her werewolf transformation, and it has so many images in it that I feel like I should use it here. Technically, there are more images in this one than in most of my animated shows, since I use puppets most of the time. And this is one people didn't seem to like at first, but then it grew on everybody, like that green hair on this woman's head. Hope you like it. The Green-Haired Dog Lady of the Woods. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a Dogman transformation story for you, or I guess a dog lady transformation anyway. I don't mind what you call me, as long as you mean it in a friendly manner. You can even crack jokes about me having a dog face or whatever, although I didn't exactly ask to become a werewolf woman. It was a gift from a dear friend. I'm not entirely unhappy with it. I had to grow to like it, I'll be honest. But I've never had a normal life anyhow, so I've adjusted. In some ways it's not as nice as being a real girl, but in other ways it's sort of better than it used to be when I was human. I don't mean to say I'm not real anymore or that I'm not human. I just mean I'm only human part-time these days. I see people in your comment section asking how to become a werewolf, and others explaining methods that they claim work. Let me explain yet another way that you can find yourself becoming a werewolf woman. Or guy, for that matter. At least, according to me. And my opinions may not reflect those of this channel. Now, I went to art school and I had a few girlfriends, but I also like to spend time alone. I'd go to clubs with my girls, but then I'd head off into the woods with my dog Ninja next to me. Ninja was a mixed breed of some sort or another. That was all I knew back then. We would explore the woods together, and he would guide me home. He always knew the way back, and he always knew when we should leave, like when a bear was approaching, or some mean girls from school. He was a pretty magical friend. One day when he ate some mushrooms, so did I. I figured he would know if they were safe, since Ninja seemed to understand those woods. Well, we both went on a bit of a voyage together that afternoon, and we had to sit down for a few hours before we could stand up and walk back home. During that time when the world spun around us, and every single thing seemed to breathe in and out, Ninja talked to me. I assumed I was hallucinating, so I just went with it. He told me that he was really a werewolf, but he chose to stay in dog form because he loved me and he wanted the best for me. I just thought that was so sweet that I hugged him and cried. Although he did draw blood when he did what he did. I asked him what that was all about, and he said that he just gave me a gift. After his time on Earth was done, and he could no longer be my protector and guide, then I would become the next werewolf, and I could protect and guide myself. I laughed inside, and I might have laughed on the outside too, I can't remember. Well, eventually, years later, it came time for that dog to move on to the next world, and I was hit pretty hard by it. My girls wanted to take me out to cheer me up, but I asked to put that off for a night or two. I wanted to be alone, and I wanted to go into those woods in remembrance of my friend who I had lost. It was there when I first began to change, to transform. It was Ninja's promise come fulfilled. It was his gift being passed on to me. I sort of knew that right from the beginning, but it's not an easy thing to accept if you know what I mean. Even if you think you believe in werewolves, that doesn't mean you expect a hallucinated promise from your dog to come true upon his passing, unless I didn't hallucinate that promise. Once the transformation starts, it pretty much takes over what you're doing. I mean, you aren't going to be able to watch YouTube or listen to tunes once the change starts hitting you. That first time it happened to me, the change sort of kept progressing, then regressing, then advancing again. To be honest, it still happens that way for me around a quarter to a third of the time, but usually not as bad as that first time. I kept thinking it was stopping, and then I was getting better, but then something else would happen. Well, like my lips turned black, and then my nose did too. And then it started to sort of go back to normal, except the next thing that happened was me growing fangs or whatever. I think the ear thing happens first for me most often. It's like my hair bunches up and becomes flesh ears, and then holes open up that connect to my ear canals. Suddenly I can hear like 10 times, 20 times, who knows how many times more stuff than I could hear before. I'll get real with you. That first time that I lost my hearing and then regained it so much louder and more detailed, I was not seeing this as a positive development. This was information overload. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think canines are smarter than humans, as it's clearly not the case. But there are ways in which werewolves process sensory information that's far more efficient than the way humans do. Or at least, I can hear more and I can understand more about what I'm hearing when I'm in my furry form than when I'm original flavor me. The same sort of thing happens for your ability to smell as well, but not until your nose folds out like an accordion. That was the worst part of any of it for me the first time. Since then I know it's coming, but the first time your face begins to extend out in front of your eyes, you probably aren't gonna enjoy it. Sometimes I'm growing fangs at the same time as that, and it can actually really hurt. Usually though, I become conscious of the fangs either before or after the snout extends itself. I apologize for not being able to give you a simple listicle explaining what happens first, second, and so forth, but every part of my life is chaotic. My brother says I'm chaotic neutral. I don't know about the neutral part, but I got the word chaos tattooed on my body in a secret place, and I'm telling you, fate tattooed it all over my life, in the same way. Each time I become the werewolf, it happens in different ways and in different orders, like it's still having trouble interfacing with my nervous system. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe that's why it works differently each time for me. I'm just guessing though, obviously. A lot of what was happening the first time was utterly baffling to me. I only witnessed parts of it reflected back in large mud puddles in the woods, since it had rained recently. It wasn't until the second time it happened that I could actually witness a good 70 or 80% of the transformation in a mirrored surface and understand it all better. The first time was the most frightening time, since I didn't know that I wasn't dying, to be honest. I felt like I was in that old movie The Thing, where I was mutating all over the place. I might have been exploding for all I knew. I mean, I did remember what I had hallucinated my old pooch saying to me, but I didn't really put that together with this until the second time, when I could see it clearly as it was happening. This first time was pain and fear, and my heart going so fast that I thought it was going to break itself and stop working. That first time, I actually went all the way to becoming a four-legged werewolf. It's only happened one time again since then. I usually stop changing at some point when I'm still up on two legs. I did write down a description of the end part of my first transformation in my diary back the next day after it happened. I'm gonna cut and paste that directly in here because it's a fresher memory of it than I could possibly write for you today. I warn you, it's a bit ornate and flowery, which was my style before I started spending my nights running around barefoot, chasing people around and scaring everybody in the woods. My new lifestyle can bring you a little more down to earth than my old art school scene. Anyway, here's how I remembered my first transformation the morning after it happened. As the full moon rose high in the night sky, I could feel an inexplicable restlessness stirring within me. It was a strange sensation, as if my very essence were being pulled toward the celestial body above. My heart raced, and a tingling sensation coursed through my veins, as if something primal were awakening within me. I had always been drawn to the mysteries of the night, but this was different. This was as if the moon's silver light were calling out to me, beckoning me to embrace a hidden part of myself. As the clock struck midnight, an overwhelming surge of energy coursed through my body, causing my muscles to tense and my skin to prickle. Suddenly an intense pain gripped me, as if my bones were being reshaped and rearranged. I fell to the ground, writhing in agony, unable to comprehend what was happening to me. It felt as if my body were being torn apart, as if I were being reborn into something entirely new. And then, in a moment of sheer terror and exhilaration, I felt my limbs elongate and contort, my fingers stretching into sharp claws. My senses heightened, and I could hear the rustling of leaves in the distance and the faint heartbeat of a rabbit nearby. My vision transformed, allowing me to see in the darkness with an uncanny clarity. As the transformation continued, I stood on powerful legs, covered in a thick coat of fur that shimmered under the moonlight. I was a creature of the night, a werewolf. The rush of adrenaline and the raw power coursing through my veins. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. In that moment, I felt a connection to the primal forces of nature, a deep understanding of the untamed wilderness that surrounded me. The world seemed to come alive in a way I had never experienced before. Every scent, every sound, every movement became vivid and intense. As the moonlight bathed my body, a tingling sensation began to spread from the tips of my fingers to the depths of my soul. It was an electrifying feeling, as if every cell in my body were awakening, pulsating with an untamed energy. The power surged through me, coursing through my veins like a wild river, and I could feel my muscles growing stronger, more resilient. As the transformation took hold, my senses sharpened further, and the world around me came alive in a way I had never experienced before. The air carried scents that were previously undetectable. The rustling of leaves became more beautiful than any of my favorite music, and the moonlit landscape seemed to glow with an ethereal beauty. It was as though a veil had been lifted, revealing a hidden realm that had always existed right there, but had somehow remained unseen. And then I ran. I ran so fast that I realized I had never even known what running was before that moment. I could run faster than any woman. I could run faster than anyone at all. Oh, the exhilaration of it. The wind whipped through my fur, and my paws effortlessly propelled me forward with a speed that surpassed any human or wolf. It almost felt like I was flying, my body effortlessly gliding through the night, leaving everything speeding past me in a blur. The ground beneath me became a mere suggestion, as if I could defy gravity itself. But it wasn't just the speed that amazed me, it was my new strength as well. With each stride, I could feel sheer raw power coursing through my limbs, muscles flexing with an intensity I had never known. I could leap over obstacles effortlessly, my body defying the limitations of human physicality. It was a heady feeling, a sense of invincibility that made me feel like I could conquer anything. Yet, in among the rush of power and freedom, there was also a primal instinct that emerged. The hunt. The desire to chase, to capture, to taste the rewards of that hunt. It was a part of me that I had never known existed, a deep-rooted connection to my animal nature. It was both terrifying and liberating, a duality that I struggled to comprehend. In that moment, as I ran with the strength and speed of a creature born of legend, I realized that I had become something more than human. I had become a werewolf, a being of immense power and untamed instinct. And though the transformation was both awe-inspiring and overwhelming, there was a part of me that I could no longer deny. But in amid the thrill of this newfound power, a sense of loss and confusion lingered. I was no longer the woman I once was. I had become a creature of the night, forever bound to the cycles of the moon. The duality of my existence, the struggle between my human self and the beast within, would forever shape my life. Countering that sense of loss was its equal and other side, the sense of duty binding me to this new life. My good friend had decided I would succeed him as the werewolf, and I had a duty to perform to my lost friend. I would be the werewolf, and I will be the werewolf until it comes time for me to pass the mantle on as well. As the first rays of dawn broke through the horizon, I felt the transformation slowly recede, my body returning to its human form. Exhausted and bewildered, I lay on the forest floor, contemplating the profound experience I had just undergone. From that night forward, I would forever be caught between two worlds, forever torn between the human and the beast. The moon had awakened something deep within me, something wild and untamed, and as I rose to my feet, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, I knew that my new life would never be the same again. Yeah, like I warned you, that was a lot more flowery than I would phrase any of it today. Also, I sorta cut a lot out, and made it seem as though it all proceeded in an orderly fashion the way they show it in the movies, you know? It was much messier than that, and a lot scarier too. I thought I was gonna die, and in an ugly way like that old movie Scanners, if you know what I mean. And if you don't know what I mean, well, just forget it. Especially if you're eating while watching this video. I thought it was lights out for me, and there actually was a moment of temporary blindness for me as my system kicked over to the dog's way of seeing things. It's sort of better in some ways and worse in others. Like, you probably wouldn't get as much out of studying a painting with dog eyes. But if you're looking to catch a rabbit to eat for dinner, then you're far better off going canine than human, believe me. Anyway, once I was more or less fully transformed, I could remember so many more things than before. I felt like I knew everything Ninja had done when he was the werewolf. And the same for the werewolf before him, and before him. There were mostly dogs or wolves that turned into werewolves. But I was not the first human or the first female in the lineage. Being the werewolf is an important function, I guess you might say. It is not an honorary position. There needs to be a werewolf in each generation. I don't know why, but I know that's the way it is. One time, one of my friends started quizzing me about all this. She wanted to know what exactly my turf was, and how much land I had to be the werewolf on. And were there werewolves everywhere? Were they broken down by state or county lines? I mean, she was half joking, but the truth is, I don't really know. I mean, I, the human being, don't really know the extent of the werewolf's turf. I just know that she knows, and I trust her to carry out her rounds and duties. And there will always need to be one in the future as well. We aren't just monsters. We don't kill and eat flesh. We kill and eat something that I guess might be better described as sin. I mean, I haven't stepped inside a church since I was a kid, so I don't feel like it's my place to comment on sinners and saints. But I just know that the werewolf, she goes after people who do abnormally bad things. And when I say people, I don't mean just humans. I mean points of consciousness lacking intelligence. Or points of intelligence lacking consciousness. Both are equally tasty to a werewolf. We are sin eaters. We eat animals who are diseased. But nothing hurts a werewolf. We swallow disease. And we leave behind a chance to rebuild something healthier than what had been there before our arrival. One of my friends compares me to a gardener pruning my plants, while another friend calls me the exterminator, which needs no further explanation. But the exterminator takes life away to make a healthier life possible in his wake. The exterminator is necessary. The exterminator is the werewolf. And the werewolf is me. Presenting the Scary Stories NYC Back to Ghoul Notebook. This is not an electrical device. It is an old school notebook with paper inside that you write on. You must supply your own pen, pencil, or crayon, but the Dogman Notebook can't wait for you to mark it up with whatever you like. You don't even have to be going back to school to use it either. It even works for old people like me. Stand out from the crowd with your Dogman Back to Ghoul Notebook this autumn. Available now at the link in the description and the pinned comment. Also, hopefully an image of the notebook's cover is appearing directly under this video on YouTube. If so, you can click that and order one for yourself or a loved one right now. Our final story for Halloween this year is another werewolf transformation episode. Fire fumes transformed me into a werewolf, which features a blonde wolf lady this time instead of a green-haired one. This one is allegedly true and gets heavy in places, so you have been forewarned. Hope you like it, and happy Halloween, everyone. Welcome to Scary Stories. This time you've got an interesting and compelling narrative, allegedly from an actual female werewolf. To be more clear, she claims she became a werewolf over the course of a few days, while she was poisoned with a chemical she can't, for legal reasons, name. This is obviously a very far-out claim to make, without strong evidence to back it up. and she's only providing us with her word here and nothing more. For that reason, we want it clear that we are presenting this for entertainment purposes only, and we have no idea if any of this is factual beyond the setting, which we know is real. With that warning in place, we invite you to sit back, get comfortable, and enjoy. Fire fumes turned me into a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I want to be as anonymous as possible, while alerting your viewers that I have another story about artificial agents turning someone into a werewolf, or something that I guess you'd have to describe as a werewolf. I'm talking about myself. I was a wolf woman for about 11 hours off and on. I am seeing a very special secret doctor now who I can't name. He says the reason it happened was because I was poisoned, and that unless I get poisoned again in the same way in the future, I am unlikely to ever transform another time. So how did this situation come about? Let's rewind to the beginning and I'll tell you all about it. I am an advertising copywriter originally from New York, who now lives in the Midwest with my husband Jeff, who is originally from Canada. I mainly work from home now, so when Jeff wanted to go spend a month with his family in the suburbs near Mississauga, I was happy to tag along with him and visit them again. Before I met my husband, I had never heard of this place Mississauga, but it's actually a pretty big city, and it's right near Toronto, which of course everyone's heard about. One of the funny things about it is that where we live in the Midwest is actually north of Mississauga. Anyway, it was late May or early July, and the air got really bad because of those wildfires. Jeff has asthma, and it started acting up, so we decided to drive back home. As it turned out, the bad air followed us south into the States, and we might as well have stayed with his family, as far as poor Jeff's asthma condition. He's still dealing with it as I write this. My situation was more extreme in the short term, but I wouldn't trade places with Jeff. This is a hard time for him, and I'm trying to be there for him. I feel selfish returning to talking about myself, but I am the one who became the werewolf, and that's the point of this email. So please forgive me as I'm about to blab about myself on end. On the way back I was going to do all the driving, but weirdly only like a half hour into the drive, I was the one who started feeling a shortness of breath. Jeff took over driving for a while, but then I asked him to let me out of the car. I ran off into the woods by the side of the roadway, and I'm not even sure why. I grew increasingly disoriented and was almost immediately lost. Jeff was locking up the car so he could chase me, and it would take him a while to find me in there, as I kept moving in erratic directions, and I wasn't making it easy for him. I hear people who claim to have been a werewolf talking about the ears changing first for them, and now that I'm becoming part of the community of people who experience things like this, I hear more and more of these stories. For me though, it was the hands that first began changing drastically, as if a million years of evolution were playing out in seconds in front of me. My fingers grew longer, grew shorter, and then I only had 3 fingers. Then I had 7 or 8 on each hand. I felt like my bones were being melted down and reformed, and I screamed in utter horror as I watched and listened. I was really thinking that this was food poisoning causing hallucinations, or at least I kept wishing that it would turn out to be that. Do you know how in many normal werewolf stories there's a mention of bones popping and cracking during the transformation? Well, with me it was more like popping and squishing, to be honest. It was disgusting. In fact, it's hard to think about it while I'm using my hands to type. That was absolutely terrifying, especially when I stopped doubting that it was really happening out there in the physical world. The implications of that were far worse than it being a bad hallucination. I was becoming deformed and disabled, and I didn't understand why it was happening. But pretty soon my face was mutating just like my hands were. It wasn't like a straightforward change either. It was like someone was experimenting with changing me in different ways, like they were tinkering with their creation. I remember things changing, then changing back, then changing into some third thing. I remember that my face stretched out into a very, very long snout, before shrinking back a bit. It kept changing its mind about what I should look like, but don't ask me what it was. I didn't become aware of the ears being up on top until the very end, so I'm not sure they were even there until then. They do provide better hearing than I have as a person, and they're also sort of directional. Like, if something interesting is happening someplace, you can turn your ears toward that thing, and you can then hear everything in that direction amplified. It's pretty cool, actually. The secret doctor I've been seeing tells me that I breathed in a cocktail of chemicals that caused a reaction which mimics lycanthropy. He even had a name for it, a kind of disease that makes you stronger and not weaker. I can't remember the word. He said there must have been that combination of chemicals somewhere within that forest fire, and that the weather just happened to blow those fumes my way. I asked him why there weren't werewolves running out of all the other cars, and he went into some kind of long-winded spiel about percentage chances of this or that. In other words, those chemicals only affect people just like me, not people like my husband, for instance, who remain very human throughout this entire episode. I was out in those woods until sunset, while my husband looked for me and called to me. I don't remember hearing him calling, but I believe me when he says he was. I mean, of course he was. I just wasn't listening. I was having my own personal freak-out. So your eyesight is different when you're a dog, or whatever it was that I was. Your hearing is different naturally, but there is so much more to smell than I had ever imagined. I could detect movement really well with my vision, but I don't really remember too much about color. I know that when I would see something, I would listen to it and attempt to smell it as well. Obviously, scent works better the closer you are, but when you're a dog, and you're hearing something and seeing something, then you're also searching for a particular scent, or two or three, in the air. Your smell vocabulary is much larger. You know a lot more about what stuff smells like, and what different smells mean in different contexts. It was so intense. It reminded me of the first time I ever got high, how much more intense sensations were. This was more extreme than that, of course, but that's what it reminded me of. I can sit here and discuss the more pleasant or amazing aspects of the transformation, but since I didn't understand what was going on, none of this was pleasant in real time as it happened. I remember screaming in pain, and screaming sometimes just because I'm so squeamish. This was so uncomfortable, being remodeled from the inside, and it made me feel sick. I would have cried if I had the luxury. My heart was beating so fast, I kept running in circles and screaming. Soon the screams sounded more like howls. I could see my face extended out under my eyes into a snout, like an animal snout. I think I said before that it started very long, like a snout on a greyhound almost. But it soon drew back closer to my face into something more like a werewolf from a movie or a book. I kept my long blonde hair the entire time, and most of the fur I was growing all over my body seemed to be blonde to white to silver. As the transformation mostly progressed toward me becoming a canine and human hybrid, my attention shifted to things that a dog is interested in, or a wolf or a predator in general. I became interested in food, basically. Food and sex, but since I wasn't around any handsome male werewolves, my mind stuck to the food. I saw a bird up on a branch in a tree singing a lovely song, somehow flinging my body upward into the air. I ricocheted myself off of the trunk of one tree, up to the branch the bird was singing on. From there, I snatched the bird out of the air and fell back to earth, having eaten the thing before touching down. From there I caught the whiff of something I liked. Something tasty. Something cooking over a fire. I stood and walked in the direction of the cooking food. Someone was making wieners over the campfire, and I wanted my fair share. I was planning on taking my fair share, and my unfair share too. There are things that I'm not proud of which happened on that evening. There was a camper I chased up a tree, and I freely admit it. I would pay him back for the wieners I stole because they were delicious, but I'm afraid I forgot to ask him for his Venmo. I remember descending into a kind of murderous bliss I'd never experienced before. Killing small animals never seemed like a thing to do, but once you're more dog than human, well, it's the thing that comes most naturally. Now, I can't lie and claim that this was all pleasant. It really wasn't, because of the back and forth. I was human, I was a wolf woman, I was in between, and I was starting all over. But for the most part, there was a bit of an intense reverie during the periods in which I was hunting, like a wild animal hunts. Nobody taught me what to do. I just followed my instincts, and I found it wasn't all that hard to take creatures by surprise. I found that their blood tasted finer than the most expensive meal at the finest restaurant, but I can't explain to you why. I came upon a bobcat eating something, and it grew furious at my approach. I scared it off and I ate its kill. That's the state of mind I was in. Jeff has since told me there are no bobcats in the area we were in, but I told him that's just book learning. Those books probably also say that there are no lady werewolves in those woods either, right? Right. When Jeff did eventually find me, he says I was up in a tree taking a nap. I don't remember that part, but I remember him carrying me back toward the car when I woke up. I was mostly human again, but when I saw him, it triggered something and I became quite feral again while in his arms. He was forced to drop me and talk soothingly to me to prevent me from running away all over again. I do remember talking to him, and that sometimes he'd be happy with what I said, and other times he'd look frightened in reaction. Some of the time I was responding as his loving wife, and other times I was responding as a hungry apex predator, looking to drink the blood of something soon. I don't think Jeff was comfortable driving with me in the passenger seat, so he went and got the tent out of the back of the car and set it up for us to spend the night outside. I was myself again for a while as we had some dinner and coffee over a fire Jeff built. But when he had an asthma attack, for some reason my instincts told me to run away from him. Of course he was unable to follow as he grabbed for his inhaler. And so I was once again off on my own in the woods, this time in the dark of night. I have to say that I was not afraid of the transformations happening to me anymore by this point. In fact, I became more canine than before when I changed this time. I even remember running on all fours. It was the ultimate freedom. It didn't even hurt to run on my bare hands and feet on the hard rocky ground. I was built to do this. It was the most natural thing in the world for me to do. I don't think there is much to compare the joy I felt in that moment to the first time my husband and I made love, possibly. Not much else though. It was a very special feeling to know that I could run that fast, that I could climb trees, that I had such freedom of movement that I never had before, and will never have again. Yes, there was the bloodlust, but beyond that was a kind of a peace, unlike anything I've experienced as a human being. I'm sorry if that's vague, but these are the excited feelings of an animal that I'm describing. not the intellectual thoughts of an adult human. Basically, I could reduce it all to these 3 words. It felt good. That night I saw things that humans don't see, that we can't see. I saw types of life forms that I bet I wouldn't have seen with human eyes. There are things that live in the woods which seem to be made of living shadow. There are others that look more like a kind of liquid living light. Those swim through the air. I found them beautiful to watch, but their vibration and smell was deadly. I think they were electrified or something. I don't know what animated the shadow beings, but the light beings seemed electric. So there are some things out there in the night that even werewolves are afraid of. That's what I learned from this. In the morning I woke up in the car in the back seat, curled up in a ball. I got up and stretched, nearly giving Jeff a heart attack. I thought he had found me and carried me back, but apparently I found my own way back and he didn't even know I was there. I was feeling great, so I joked with Jeff saying, "We canine bitches got the homing instinct, yo." He didn't think it was funny. He'd been out searching for me all night, and he'd been having asthma and panic attacks the entire time. I was out having the time of my life, and then I was sleeping like a baby in the car, while he was out making himself sick, worried about me. I felt up to driving, so I did, after making note of where this had all happened. I later reported this location to our secret doctor, but he said the source of this chemical poisoning could have been almost anywhere north of us. It didn't have to be anywhere near the location I got hit by it, since the winds were blowing all kinds of nastiness around in those days. In fact, up in Canada, it's still going on, a lot of it. So our working theory is that some people had a small lab set up out in the woods, and that lab got burned down, releasing this unique cocktail into the air, which turned me into a mutating mess for about 11 hours. My doctor also insists that I couldn't have been the only one affected, but I was probably the only one transformed in that immediate area. His guess is that anywhere from a dozen to a couple hundred people might have been affected the way I was, but to me that sounds like something that might have gotten picked up by the media, and even if there was a news blackout censoring this information, it probably would have snuck into the public consciousness through social media or something. I mean, unless everyone affected had a gallant and loving husband like mine to come collect them and bring them away from there. Maybe everyone it happened to is as motivated as I am to keep quiet about it. Heck, with the bloodlust I was feeling, I wouldn't be surprised if some people out there might have taken down other people, and not just squirrels and birds. Well, I'm fine now. I seem to have no lingering after effects from any of this. My husband is not doing very well though, and it's clear that our air quality is still not the level it needs to be for living things to thrive. We live in pretty horrible times, so please take all of these threats seriously. Make sure to question all official narratives, and make up your own mind about what's really happening. You should never expect a politician to tell you the truth, ever. Find out for yourself, and take care of each other. This is me signing out. Some people are great, but he is greater. He's so big you take an elevator just to say hello and to greet him. I'm talking about Godzilla Tim. Please join me in thanking Godzilla Tim Walker. who donates to us and is a channel member as well. He's probably one of our most important channel members of all time, and we wouldn't still be here on the internet if it weren't for his kindness and generosity. Thank you, Godzilla Tim. You are the coolest guy in the entire United Kingdom, and we are very grateful to you. The Big G gets cool perks in return for helping us out, and here to fill you in about all those is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.